Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, The Medieval Reader. So today I wanted to talk about some of the books I just recently finished in the last 2 weeks or so. So these are not in the order I read them. I'm going to just take the first book from the top of the stack. Okay, so the first one I read was Le Jeu de la Feuille by Adam de la Halle. In English it's called The Play of Madness. I will link an English version of it in the description. But Adam de la Halle was a 13th century playwright. He also wrote a play about Robin and Marian as well, which I'd read before that. But today I'm going to talk about The Play of Madness. He's also known as Adam le Bossu or Adam the Hunchback. But these are carnival-themed kind of plays that basically satirizes peasant life. And as a result, it does tend to read like wealthy upper-class people making fun of the lower class. What is interesting about this play is that Adam is actually a character in the play itself. So at the beginning, Adam tells his uncle that he wants to get rid of his wife, go to Paris, and become a scholar. And then there's this huge discussion about bigamy, which today when we think of bigamy, we think of marriage, a man married to two women, for example. But bigamy laws in the church at this time included a number of things. So that would include a man being married and having a mistress on the side. That could include a widower marrying again. That was often considered bigamy at the time, and these bigamy laws often restricted the freedom of scholars, but also the freedom of a lot of the peasants. So there's a lot of humor here about that. There's a monk who is a complete charlatan. He has the relics of the saint, and he asks people to give money and gifts to the saint for a number of personal causes. And I really liked the Joker. There's a Joker in this poem, which is why it's a carnival theme. And the Joker is the wisest man, as the Joker tends to be in many of these kind of poems. He's the one who, though he is seen as being stupid, is actually the one who has the wisest things to say in this society. So if you're interested, I will link an English translation of this poem down below, but I thought this was a really enjoyable poem. I recently finished my first P.G. Wodehouse, The Inimitable Jeeves. So I am not British, as is quite clear. So a lot of the humor was over my head, as the expressions, the jokes were over my head. But I really liked the situational humor. In each, there are about like 5 or 6 different stories about Bertie Wooster, who is this wealthy upper-class man, and his adventures with his friend Bingo Little, who is easily infatuated with women, falls for them, and then something happens and he can't be with these women. And Wooster has a servant, a valet named Jeeves, and Jeeves is stoic. He is quite a conservative man, but he's also very wise. He's always able to help Wooster and Bingo Little out of their troubles. And every time Wooster tries to help himself or his friends, he fails miserably. So that's what's funny about it. I picked up on a lot of the humor, but I couldn't give it more than 3 stars. I think partially, or maybe mostly, because the humor was over my head. Also, some of the stories are somewhat repetitive. I mean, every other story is basically about Bingo Little and his attempts at trying to win the heart of a particular woman. He's a very irresponsible man. He gambles a lot, and he kind of stalks women a lot. So, I mean, was written in the 1920s. I don't approve of their dating methods, but it's probably part of the humor. It was good. I would try to read another Wodehouse, but I thought it was okay, this one. I read Ghost Had a Watchman by Harper Lee, which is the sequel to To Kill a Mockingbird. I made a full-length discussion about this book, but essentially I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was a very important sequel to the book. I think it's important to talk about prejudice in this way, about how prejudiced people can be otherwise good people, and that doesn't mean that we excuse their behavior. It means that we realize how common prejudice can be, and especially today where we have institutional racism, this is a very important book. I saw this book on the new bookshelf at my research library. It's called Luther Refracted: The Reformer's Ecumenical Legacy. I can't really read the first author's name because it's Polish, I think, but the second author is Derek Nelson. So this year is the 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation, and despite the fact that I'm Roman Catholic, I find Reformation history really fascinating, and ecumenical relations really important, so relationships between different churches. And so I got this collection to see what topics were discussed. I think to appreciate this book, you really do need to have a pretty strong foundation in theology. Each of these essays deals with a different theological question that Luther addressed, and the legacy of that in Protestantism, but also what aspects of it could be valuable to Roman Catholics. I thought that for the most part the essay collection was really good. There was one that was dealing with community. It was written by a Baptist, and I was confused why it was in there. I've never really seen that theme explored much in Luther's writings. If anything, he had a lot of issues with the way community was realized in the church of his day, so he wasn't really concerned about community. I've never seen that. I thought that essay was the weakest. My favorite essay was by Matthew Bolton, which dealt with the more existential aspect of Luther's thought. I would have liked to see some mention of Luther's relationship with the Jews, just because that has certainly influenced all of Christianity and the way that we have treated Jews historically. I think that an essay on that would have been really nice. But for the most part, I thought that this was a good collection. And the last book I want to talk about today is The Island of the Day Before by Umberto Eco. So last year I read Name of the Rose, and Name of the Rose ended up being one of my favorite books of 2016. So I was really excited to pick up this book. I have taken 2 courses in 17th century literature. The Island of the Day Before is set in the 17th century. There's a man named Roberto who was captured at war. Basically, he ends up working for the French as a spy to learn about navigation, particularly to discover the secret of longitude, how longitude is measured, because at this time people really didn't know how to measure longitude, and trying to know how to accurately measure longitude would really improve navigation quite a bit. And so Roberto goes on this voyage disguised as a spy for Cardinal Mazarin to learn from this Dutch navigator how to determine longitude. So the story is partly about that. It's partly about his time at war against the Spanish. And it's partly about his shipwreck. So he is shipwrecked on a ship named the Daphne, and he's trying to figure out what's going on, and he thinks there's another person on the ship. There's a number of storylines going on, and of course it's Eco, so while this is a mystery, this is also an exploration of different philosophical questions in the 17th century. This brings out my inner Faust. I love reading Eco. It's so brainy, it's so much fun on an intellectual level. I really want to learn more about the discovery or the quest to discover longitude in the 17th century and the prime meridian, and how, just the history of navigation. Obviously the history of navigation is also not entirely positive, since there was imperialism and all of that. But still, I think that on a scientific level this is really interesting, and there were other scientific and religious questions that were dealt with in the 17th century that Eco mentions in this book. So I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't my favorite Echo. I love Name of the Rose. I think partially because I'm obsessed with Franciscan history, and so I knew everything that was in Name of the Rose, whereas this one I knew less about. And I also felt like this book was way too big. It could have been a lot shorter. There's one part in this book where the narrator explores the image of a dove and all the things the dove represents. And that was my favorite part of this book, because it just is a reminder that for most of history, people thought about the world on different levels. And the dove meant a lot of things to different people, and all of them are true. So Echo wrote a really good book here. It's not my favorite, but I think that if you already like some of his books, you might want to pick up The Island of the Day Before. So those are the books that I read. Tell me if you've read any of these and what your thoughts were on them. And I'll see you later. Bye now.